Welcome to the 129th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's podium. For over a century, this stage has united visionaries and leaders from politics, business, community, and the arts to share insights on the most pressing issues of our time. And with Canada in a pivotal moment, it's more important than ever that we come together.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good morning once again, everyone. Please take your seats. My name is Shazan Chu, and I'm pleased to be your host for this special Canadian Club Toronto breakfast event. This morning, we are honored to welcome two of Ontario's most senior leaders to Canada's podium at an important moment for the province's economy, investment climate, and global competitiveness. Before we begin our program, it is my pleasure to recognize those at the head table, leaders who reflect the strength and breadth of Ontario and Canada's economy. Head table guests, please stand as I call your name and remain standing. Members and guests, please hold your applause until all table members have been introduced. James Skonyak, Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President, Bruce Power. Amar Aljundi, President and Chief Executive Officer, Agnico Eagle Mines Limited. The Honourable Victor Fedeli, Chair of Cabinet, Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, Member of Provincial Parliament, Nipissing. Mirko Bibic, President and Chief Executive Officer, Bell Canada. Laszlo Varshnyi, Senior Vice President, Commercial Services and Regulatory, Enbridge Gas. Tom Cardinal, President, Carpenters Regional Council. Laryssa Waler, Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Henley Strategies, and our moderator today. Anthony G. Osler, President and Chief Executive Officer, Canadian Bankers Association. Hisham Fahmy, Chief Information Officer, TELUS. Greg Grant, Executive Vice President, Power and Energy Solutions. TC Energy, Executive Vice President and President. And joining us shortly, the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, Member of Provincial Parliament, Etobicoke North. I present your head table. Now, before we begin, I would like to recognize the support of our partners and sponsors whose leadership make these conversations possible. Today's event is presented by Bruce Power. Thank you for your continued leadership and partnership. We are also grateful to our event sponsors, Agnico Eagle, Bell Canada, Enbridge, TC Energy, and TELUS for their valued support. To our season sponsors, the Canadian Bankers Association and the Carpenters Regional Council, thank you for your ongoing commitment to Canadian Club Toronto. We also extend our thanks to our official airline sponsor, Air Canada, and to Canada's Forest Trust, our nature partner, who help us reduce our carbon footprint by planting a smart forest in our honor. We are especially pleased to welcome students from the University of Toronto's Political Science program, joining us today with the support of Bell Canada and Simon Dwyer. Thank you. And thank you for helping to connect these next generation of leaders. And now it is my pleasure to introduce James Scania, Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President at Bruce Power, who will formally introduce Premier Ford, Minister Fedeli, and today's moderator, Laryssa Waler. James, welcome to Canada's podium.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for being here on a beautiful Monday morning. You all know the Premier, so it's pretty tough to introduce the Premier, and everybody knows what I'm going to say. So I want to introduce the moment with really two kind of key thoughts. Thought number one is one of the rules that I've always believed in with economics is very simple. Nobody spends, nobody works. And at the Bruce Power site today, we have 10,000 men and women who are working to renew our electricity infrastructure for decades to come. How do we make that happen in all of our industries and grow Ontario's economy? Well, we do it with one word, and that word is certainty. And I think what you're going to hear from the Premier, what you're going to hear from Minister Fedeli, is the work that the Ontario government is doing collectively to drive certainty in what can be uncertain times. And that's all of our job as leaders, is to create that certainty so we can drive the most important metric in our economy, which is the number of men and women at work in a given day. But the other thought I wanted to leave you with, and I'm sure the Premier is going to be driven nuts by this for the next few weeks, because everybody's going to call him Dr. Ford now. For anybody that knows the Premier, he's a really humble guy. But I think that was very well-deserved over the weekend. But I think what's most important about his recognition on the weekend is not so much the doctorate. You should really just think about the moment. One of our most important trading relationships to an adjacent jurisdiction, Michigan, a U.S. state, major auto state, major manufacturing state. The area that the Premier received his award is in what they call Saginaw County. It's a lot like where I come from in rural southwestern Ontario. Energy, agriculture, and manufacturing. That jurisdiction thought it was important to recognize our Premier. It's because he was on their radar for the work that he has done. So, I think it's great to congratulate the Premier. We can now call him Dr. Ford. But what is most important is the work that he has done to build these relationships, to earn that recognition, not just for his own personal leadership, but for our province. And with that, I'd like to welcome Ontario's Premier, the Honourable and Dr. Ford.
Well, first of all, James, I know you just couldn't resist that. I got all, and it's a real honor, by the way, getting that doctorate, but I have every one of my buddies all weekend setting up appointments and, being my first patient and so on and so forth. But this is great because my teleprompter person is not here, and this could get pretty dangerous if I go off the script right now. But I'll start off with talking about James. What a true leader is. And I just want to thank you, James, for everything you're doing on medical isotopes, so building out our nuclear foundation per se. And I know you have Bruce C going full tilt. Well, you're getting there, not quite full tilt yet, but you're building on. And I believe Bruce is, if not the largest, second largest in the entire world. And we're going to build another massive plant out in Wesleyville, which will be the largest large-scale nuclear in the entire country. In the country, I should say, in the entire world. And those are some of the things that we're going to focus on as we move forward as a province, our strengths. That's my common visitor. That's all right. They're just greeting me right now, and they'll be going pretty soon. But we're going to continue focusing on one thing, and that's the economy. And we had an opportunity to go visit the U.S. with Vic Fedeli not too long ago in Texas. And folks, I got to tell you, and Vic will concur, you know, we're in a super competitive area, not just in the U.S., but the entire world. And that's what I always say to our team, our ministers, you know, it has to be faster, quicker, immediate. And that goes for all government right across the board. So, and you know, it's great to get on the phone and talk to someone or by Zoom. Nothing, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but nothing is better than looking across the table from someone, eye to eye, and basically selling them on Ontario, telling them why Ontario is the greatest place in the entire world. And that's what we did. And we walked away with over $6 billion of investments in a very short period of time. So folks, it's a real pleasure to join you all today, and I love talking to business leaders because each and every one of you are the backbone of our great province. And as I mentioned, I have my super salesperson, Minister Fedeli. I still don't know how you do it, running all over the world. He's here a few days. Next thing you know, he's over in Europe and over in Asia and down to South America. So we thank you for being our top salesperson, as I call you, Minister of Economic Development and Trade. And then Minister Khanjin. Minister Khanjin is absolutely critical to our province, cutting red tape and just duplication that we've seen in government at all levels of government. But through Andrea's leadership, she was able to find $1.3 billion of savings, which I'll talk about in a bit. But thank you, Andrea, for all your hard work. And where we get this information are people right in this room saying there's red tape or there's regulations, and we have to streamline that red tape and regulations. And so we appreciate all your support. If you see anything that's getting in the way of you doing business in Ontario, please reach out to us, and it'll be on the chopping block. And then Minister Mulroney, the gatekeeper, watches everything, the President of the Treasury, just doing an incredible job. Caroline, thank you for watching all the money that's leaving the province for investment. But and I know your right-hand person, Peter Bethenfalvey, isn't here, but I'll tell you, that guy's tight as skin on a grape, as I always say, and you make an incredible team, watching money that's coming in and watching money that's going out. And then we have Minister McCarthy that's wearing two hats, infrastructure and the environment. Todd, you're incredible. I always say Todd's probably in the top 5 litigators in the country. We're lucky to have him. And then we also have P.A. Vickers, which is incredible. He's taking care of agriculture. People don't realize agriculture is probably our largest sector in the entire province. And then, of course, Minister Oosterhoff, that's taking care of the energy and the mining sector. Do you know what we're fortunate? I'm blessed. I have all business people surrounding me on our cabinet. I've never seen, we've been in politics for probably well over 30 years. I've never seen a stacked cabinet and a stacked caucus that I'm so blessed to have, and I'm just very grateful because I can't do this alone. It's Team Ontario, everyone in this room, along with our incredible caucus members. And all the mayors, it goes down to the mayors and the municipal leaders and the federal government. You know, folks, when we all work together, when the municipality and the regions and the province and the federal government works together and starts cutting red tape and moving forward, we are unstoppable. Because I'll tell you the story when Vic and I were down in Texas, and we went to one of the companies that are building the large data centers, and they were building out about 2.5 million square foot data centers. And they told me a story that they went into the town just outside of Dallas, and it wasn't far, 10 minutes outside, and there was a farmer's field, and they talked to the mayor about getting a permit. Well, this is a 2.5 million square foot facility broken into chunks of 250,000 feet. So Google will take one part, and Microsoft will take another, and so on and so forth. Well, the mayor said, we'll get the permit in 6 months, you can get shovels in the ground. And Vic and I look at each other and thinking 6 months. Well, what happened? It actually took 8 months. The mayor came up, sat in front of the board, apologized profusely. And that's the challenge. We can't be taking 5 years to get a permit for a doghouse. We need to start moving faster, quicker, immediate, cut the red tape. And there's some great municipalities that do that. And we just have to get rid of those development charges, because what we're doing, we're competing against not just the US, but we're competing against the entire world. And it's great to see so many of Ontario's world-class industries and business leaders here today, because again, you're the backbone of Ontario, the backbone of Canada. Ontario, I won't mention the federal minister, pretty high-ranking federal minister, chatted last night. He goes, Ontario is driving our economy across our entire country. We're going to continue being the engine of Canada and right across our entire country. I also want to thank Colleen and Shazam for having us here, and the entire team at Canadian Club Toronto, for inviting me to speak with all of you this morning and share the steps our government is taking to protect Ontario workers and families through this time of economic uncertainty. President Trump's tariffs are taking direct aim at our workers, and in response, our government is delivering on our plan to protect Ontario by building a more competitive, resilient, and self-reliant economy. Our plan is cutting red tape and speeding up approvals for major projects, including unlocking our vast supply of critical minerals. Folks, I don't think people realize the amount of critical minerals we have. We have over 170 critical minerals, those precious minerals that the entire world wants. And before, we would take from the previous federal government, I think the world of our new prime minister, he's doing a great job, but before we were last in the world in getting permits. Just think of that, because there was delays and delays, up to 15 to 17 years to put a bore sample on the ground. Unacceptable. We went from last place in the world to second fastest in the entire world, just next to Nevada, and we're going to catch them next year. It's going to take less than 24 months, and that's a great leadership through Minister Lecce and Minister Oosterhoff, so thank you for doing a great job with our critical minerals. Just in the Ring of Fire, and there's so much more than just the Ring of Fire, we can add over $22 billion and 70,000 jobs to Ontario's economy. Thanks to the partnerships we've built with the First Nations, and we can't do it without those partnerships with the First Nations, and the federal government as well. It's all about collaboration and cooperation, and we are now on track to get shovels in the ground on the roads to the Ring of Fire next month. We've been talking about it, government after government, 20, 30 years, where finally we have the equipment up there and we're going to start building these roads. That means construction timelines on the road are now 5 years ahead of schedule. Across Ontario, we're delivering the largest infrastructure plan in Canadian history, and I would say probably one of the largest, speaking to our US counterparts in North America. With $236 billion over the next 10 years, and what we're doing, we're upfronting as much as we can over the next 5 years to build new roads, highways, transit, hospitals, and schools, and more. This plan to build will support Ontario's long-term growth, but it's also keeping tens of thousands of workers on the job right now, despite President Trump's tariffs. Now, as Caroline knows and Peter knows, when you're looking at the budget, they literally go line item by line item by line item. You have two choices. Either start cutting or you start continuing putting money into infrastructure. And that's why we held at a AA credit rating, as every other province is going down, because we're prudent fiscal managers. But you never, ever cut infrastructure spending. That creates jobs and thousands of jobs and increases productivity, getting from points A to point B, no matter if it's a 413 or the Bradford bypass or the 401 tunnel. We're getting people and goods where they need to go a lot faster. We're powering these projects by building more nuclear energy, including the first small modular reactors in the G7 and the first large-scale nuclear facility in decades out by Wesleyville. So Minister Lecce and I go down to New York, and we meet Governor Hochul. What a wonderful governor, too. She's great. So she looks at Minister Lecce and myself and says, Premier, we're upgrading our energy by 1,000 megawatts. And I said, that's incredible, Governor. Thank you. You know, that's anything we could do. We signed a deal with you and so on and so forth. She said, what are you increasing your energy? I said, about 16,500. So that puts it into perspective. And as I call him Lech, as Lech tells me, let's round it off to 16,000. That can build power for 16 million homes. But we know we aren't going to have 16 million homes. So what we can do is power these massive data centers that draw massive amounts of energy. And these large companies that are coming here to invest that need the power, we can power them. We can also send energy to our great neighbors south of the border, and they are great neighbors. When I was down there, not only with Vic, but when I was over the weekend, they roll out the carpets, and I can tell you, Americans love Canadians. I always say, don't let the little distraction with the president get in the way. We're going to continue building those relationships. And we already power 1.5 million homes and businesses in New York State, in Michigan, and Minnesota. We need to power more going down south if we have excess. Take care of our home base first, always. But if we have excess energy, we should be shipping it down south. Our small modular reactors, we have orders around the world. We're leading the G7 when it comes to the SMR, so we can ship those around the world. By increasing our nuclear capacity, we're decreasing our reliance on foreign energy and making life more affordable, protecting businesses and families from global market shocks and price spikes that are now out of control. And folks, I gotta tell you that thanks to our Buy Ontario policy, which is so important. If we have buyers here, it's critical that you're buying Ontario lumber, steel, vehicles, machinery, and anything else we can so that Ontario tax dollars support Ontario workers. Folks, we are an economic powerhouse, not just in Canada, not in North America, but around the world. People are paying attention. If they want a place to invest, they're looking at Ontario to invest. If we were a standalone country, which I never ever recommend, we'd be the 9th largest economy with GDP in the world with $1.2 trillion. And I know, Vic, you always tell me we're close to $1.3 trillion. You look at that compared to the rest of the world. We're also working to diversify our trading relationships so we can reduce our reliance on the United States. We're building and expanding airports, seaports, railways, highways, and pipelines that will get Ontario products to new customers around the globe. And yes, we're expanding airports. If the mayor's here, we're expanding down at the island. Billy Bishop, it's a gold mine, and I'll tell you, it's we do a lot of polling, folks, over and over and over again about everything from dogs in the park to you name it. But the poll keeps coming back consistently that 70% of the people want that airport expanded, because you think of it, there's no place in the world has an airport literally downtown that you can land on and jump on the ferry to get across. Just last week, Minister Fedeli and I, we hosted a trade diversification roundtable where we spoke with representatives from 15 countries across Asia, Europe, Latin America, and Middle East about working together to diversify our trade and expand Ontario's global trade footprint. And what I was saying at the table, we did a little quick calculation. So our great friends south of the border in the United States, which we always need, and I love the US, we always need them, but we do have to diversify. So they have a GDP about $32 trillion. That's a big market, right? Around the table, there's $38 trillion, $2.2 billion. And it goes back to when we diversify our trade and we build partnerships with all other countries, we don't have to be so self-reliant on one particular trading partner. This room's full of business people. Would you put 65, 70% of your sales into one customer? No, you wouldn't. You diversify that trade, and that's exactly what we're doing. And thanks to our efforts, we've seen significant increase in international trade. Since 2018, trade to non-U.S. markets is up nearly 75%, and nearly 28% last year alone compared to the previous year. The numbers are staggering over the last 8 years. We've seen two-way trade with the UK, and these are just some of the countries, not all. The UK up over 200%, up 90% with India, 40% with the European Union, and an incredible 288% with Vietnam. But every single country, our trade is going up. And you can tell as simply as looking what we're shipping to the Port of St. John. Because when we ship goods to the Port of St. John, that means it's either going to Europe, it's going down to South America, and we've doubled the shipments to the port out in New Brunswick. This trade is creating new jobs that President Trump's tariffs can't touch, so we can protect workers here at home. And we have trade deals with 15 jurisdiction countries, 51 different countries within those 15 jurisdictions. So there's endless opportunities out there. And as we look to new markets overseas, we're also tearing down internal trade barriers here in Canada, which cost our economy up to $210 billion in lost economic potential every year. The vast majority of the population didn't know we had a Canadian free trade agreement, that you couldn't ship a case of wine in Ontario across the country, or vice versa. You couldn't get BC wine over here. That is the craziest thing we've ever seen in our entire life. And I'm proud to say that Ontario led the way, led the entire country when it comes to tearing down these barriers. We signed agreements with 10 other provinces and territories since April of last year, 2025. We're making it easier for credentialed workers from elsewhere in Canada to move to Ontario and get on the job a lot faster. And we're first and only province that have completely removed all our party-specific exceptions under the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, so we can get things moving quicker. Folks, that adds another $210 billion to our economy, roughly anywhere from 4 to 6% to our GDP. These are the things that we need to do a lot faster. You know, when you hear governments talk is cheap. We want to see action. We've heard all the talk, we've heard all the promises. Now let's start making the rubber hit the road. I believe in lean methodologies, driving lean systems in every single one of our ministries, and that's what we're doing. And to ensure that Ontario continues to have a competitive conditions we need for growth. We're keeping taxes and fees low, saving business and families $12 billion and 1.8 million working hours every year. Think of this, folks. With a lot of people, we've been in politics a long time. We're the only government that I know of. We've never, ever raised a tax, ever. We will never, ever raise a tax because governments don't have an income problem. They have a spending problem. And when you create more opportunities, you lower taxes. Very simple economics 101, but very few governments around the world, even in Canada, understand this. Put money into people's pockets. They're going to go out, they're going to stimulate the economy. They're going to go out and do things they might otherwise not be able to do. Go out for dinner, maybe put a little addition on, maybe save for a home, or buy a new home. And we're glad we got rid of that HST as well, which is really stirring the market. And when you put it into businesses, I'll tell you what businesses do. They invest it into their people, into technology, into infrastructure, into buying new equipment. And that creates an opportunity to hire more people. Folks, this is economics 101. And we've seen an increase. Since we've never raised a tax, we've lowered it by $12 billion. We've seen investments grow to $222 billion, and I want to emphasize, I always tell the minister, get the fresh numbers. That was last year's numbers. I think we're well over $230 billion. But isn't that amazing, folks? When you lower taxes, people invest. Isn't that surprising? Well, we're going to continue lowering taxes, continue cutting red tape and regulations. And one example is our new $1.1 billion small business tax cut. We cut taxes by over 30%, saving 375,000 businesses an average of $5,000 a year. So they can invest back in their businesses, create more jobs and economic opportunities. By cutting red tape and standing up for our talented workers, we're building a stronger, more competitive provincial economy. Because a strong economy is the foundation of a strong public service like healthcare, education, infrastructure that Ontario families are counting on. And we're seeing the results across Ontario. As I mentioned, in 2018, we welcomed over $222 billion of new investments, with 1 million more people working today than they were in 2018. And Vic shows me every single night, folks, 365 days a year. It doesn't matter if it's Easter or Christmas or New Year's Eve. I get a message from Vic. Here's all the companies that are investing, here's the amount of employees, and here's the dollar figure. And then we have our weekly meeting. And right now, as we sit around the table last week, you literally have billions and billions of dollars ready to come into Ontario. So we're just crossing the T's and dotting the I's with the folks from Invest Ontario. Last year alone, we welcomed over $35 billion in new investment from 750 companies, creating over 64,000 new jobs. That includes the growing sector like AI and the tech sector, which we saw over $2.6 billion in new investments just last year, a 69% increase from the previous year. We're really focusing on the AI sector because, as everyone knows, AI was born here at U of T. And these tech students and AI students at one time used to hop on a plane and take off. Not any longer. They're staying here. And we have a reputation around the world of having some of the best talent anywhere. And when we were, again, in Texas, there was a massive company. We saw 13 companies in 2 days in 3 cities. But Vic, you remember what one company said? There's not enough talent here in Texas, so we're putting our tech sector center, world headquarters, up into Toronto. But we've heard this over and over again, creating that environment and conditions for companies to come here. We have the most educated population anywhere in the G7. Think of that. We're graduating 94,000 STEM graduates every year. No jurisdictions graduating 94,000 STEM graduates, and we'll be up over 100,000 STEM graduates. In every sector, in every part of our province, we're seeing it time and time again. The world is choosing Ontario. Our province is being challenged, but I've never been more optimistic about our future. Ontario has the resources, the experience, and the people to be the most competitive and prosperous place in the entire world. And we can't control what President Trump does, but what we can control is the decisions we make here at home. And we need to make the decisions that will protect our workers, build a stronger economy, and build a stronger Canada, even when those decisions are tough. We need to unlock our resources, and like big projects like highways and pipelines and airports and more, that will keep our workers on the job. That is our government's plan, and we'll continue getting it done. I want to thank everyone for coming. Feel free to call me if you see any roadblocks, you need any help. My phone number's on the internet, and I'll rattle it out now if you want. 647-612-3673. Honestly, I'm behind. I get close to 1,000 a day, but thank you, everyone, and may God bless the people of Ontario. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, wow, my mic is working.
Hi.
Hi, good morning.
How you doing?
I'm great, how are you?
Good. Well, I made notes when the Premier was talking and scratched off
I
a
did
bunch
too.
of the things I was going to say because he said pretty much everything. I added a couple things. He talked about those.
So we are going to do our best to keep everybody on schedule this morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to skip the introductions because everybody knows who you are. So Minister, we'll start with a question about trade. We're living in unprecedented times. And Instagram showed me a video yesterday of Warren Buffett saying, you can't make a good deal with a bad person. Yeah. Do you want to tell us how are the negotiations going, or lack thereof? What you see as the timetable? What are Ontario's priorities for the federal government as we're going into CUSMA negotiations?
Well, thank you. Great to see you again, by the way. I watched that same Buffett interview. I was quite surprised. He was so casual at 90-some years old now. He's really just talking from the heart. It was quite fascinating to listen. It's worth watching and get a little bit of an insight. With the CUSMA negotiations, first of all, table set, it's in the hands of the federal government. That's who does our country's negotiations. We do feed into it a little bit, and I can tell you the kinds of things very specific that we are talking about. But to fully understand a little bit about what the Premier said, we, Ontario, not Canada, just the province of Ontario, we do $500 billion a year in two-way trade with the United States. So you have Mexico is their #1 trading partner. China is their #2 trading partner. The province of Ontario is the United States' #3 trading partner. That's how large, that's the scale of what we're talking about. We are the #1 customer for 15 states. We are the #2 customer for 12 more. That's how significant that Ontario and the United States, that's how significant our relationship is. It is so intertwined. You cannot separate it. Premier likes to use the expression, you can't unscramble the omelet. You just need to make a bigger omelet. And so we have President Trump saying, I don't need anything from Canada. Well, I beg to differ, and we use these points. We're in the States an awful lot, meeting with senators, members of Congress, governors, staff, USTR, the trade office. We meet with everybody we can, and to be perfectly frank, we haven't found a person down there who is in favor of tariffs. When we meet with Republicans, these are really bad, but I can't raise my hand up, I'll get my head cut off. They'll primary them, and so that's the biggest fear. They know how harmful this is. There's a new study, Kiel study, I think it came out, 96% of all of the tariffs are being paid for by Americans. So this just sort of table sets where we are. But I think about 85% of all the potash bought in the United States comes from Canada. 80% of all the nickel the US uses in the aerospace sector comes from Sudbury. 53% of all the nickel the US uses in defense comes from Sudbury. They have one nickel mine left in the United States, and it's a really low-class, low-grade nickel, and it's going to close in 3 years. They have nothing. If you fired up every one of their aluminum plants, and I'll stop at this, if you fired up every one of their aluminum plants, 24/7, 100% capacity, they would make 16% of all the aluminum they need. So you wonder why in the United States today, refrigerators, stoves, all white goods are so expensive, because 60% of their aluminum comes from Canada, mostly from Quebec. They're buying it and paying the tariff. So where are we? This is an important question for the federal government. You heard the Premier talk about one of the ministers that called him last night and said, we need you, Ontario. You're the economic engine of the country, and we are, simply put. So, I've looked at the Prime Minister's comments lately where he talks about we're hoping to, basically get the same deal. A lot rides on it. And we can always talk about the things that we're doing to mitigate it on our side.
Okay.
If we have any time.
Great. I'm going to try to merge some of these questions together. When the Premier was talking about not being over-reliant on one partner, one trading partner, Do you want to talk a little bit about, you told me yesterday how many trade missions you've personally been on around the world, how many additional missions your ministry's undertaken, and the one thing I remember about you when you became Minister of Economic Development and Trade is that you really were insisting on seeing an ROI on the dollars spent on trade missions and having a Consul General's office and the money that we're spending outside of Ontario. You were actually quite militant about what are the numbers coming back into Ontario. So do you want to talk a little bit about the priority markets for you, where you see the opportunities coming in, and what you're hearing from companies around the world, specifically about Ontario's reputation, even vis-a-vis other provinces in Canada?
It's fascinating when we travel around the world. So we did 30 missions last year to 20 different countries. It was an exhausting year, but a very, very successful year. Our missions are very different. It's one or two people, roll up the sleeves, we get off an airplane at noon, by 2 o'clock we're in a round table, by 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock we have a dinner put together. It's pick out the few that we were prearranged to meet the next day or the next couple of days. You know, when we were in Austria, we came home with Hashlacker. They built a $100 million plant for cross-laminated timber, but it wasn't enough. We went back 2 years later, pushed hard on the beams, came back home with a $107 million plant to build beams. We go to Switzerland. We come home with a facility from Roche. We go to the UK. We come home with an $800 million AstraZeneca facility that we won. We go to Switzerland. We come back with Jungbunzlauer. It's a company that makes a gum that goes in Coca-Cola and things, Xanfer gum. We go to Norway. We come home with $3 billion plant from Vianode for synthetic graphic. The list goes on and on and on. We rarely make a journey that we don't come back and within 6 months make an announcement. Massili, we were in France a few months ago, came home with an $85 million plant to make tin cans. You know, it's interesting. The Premier says he wants every nut, every bolt, every widget made in Ontario. And so we've put things together like the Ontario Together Trade Fund to help companies pivot out of the troubles that President Trump is causing, or to reshore things. And it's amazing. We had something like, it's a $150 million fund. We had something like $557 million worth of applications for it. It just tells us people want to build in Ontario. We have everything they need: talent, clean energy, fully serviced land. The list goes on and on of the good things that we have, but it all comes right back to that first one, the talent. Think about Toyota. They were named, again, last year, the #1 auto plant in the world. This is not the #1 Toyota plant. This is the #1 auto plant in the entire world, of all the thousands, in Cambridge, Ontario. That's here in Ontario. It's all because of our rich talent and the talent base that we have. So we've got a lot going for us in Ontario, and around the world they would say, in this tumultuous world with Russia's illegal war in Ukraine, the turmoil in Israel, today now in Iran, China's big grip over our supply chain. A lot of bad news out there in the world. They look across the ocean and they look at Ontario and they see this beacon of light, and they know they can come here in a reliable, a stable, but mostly a predictable location. That's why we see companies from the States turning around and coming to Ontario. That's why we see companies, when they're looking for a foothold in North America, they come here to Ontario because of that rule of law, that stability that we offer them. They know what they're going to get when they get here. When we sit in Premier Ford's solarium with the company, I just remember the last one from Norway, and out comes that big mitt to shake hands. They know they got a deal. They know they don't have anything else to worry about. Everything's going to be taken care of. Zoning, all of the permitting, the land. They just know. They feel that confidence in him. I saw that time after time after time after time with every deal that we've made.
Yeah, I mean, as James was saying, certainty and predictability is like the #1 driving force that businesses look for. So that's great to hear. I'm going to start to wrap it up here. As everybody's day, you need all these people to go to work. So because they're going to make the money that we need. The last question I want to ask you, I was in North Bay a few weeks ago, and as the Northlander was pulling into the station, it was such a pivotal moment for you. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when you got into politics, one of the driving forces was to bring the Northlander back to the north.
Yeah.
I know this wasn't in our prepared questions, but I want you to talk a little bit about how important it is to link Southern Ontario with Northern Ontario, our critical minerals, that competitive advantage that critical minerals gives us over our G7 counterparts, and just how important the Northlander is to you.
Well, first of all, the Northlander is the train that leaves Union Station and takes you all the way up to Cochrane, if that's where you want to go, puts you on the Northland, or puts you on the Polar Bear Express if you want to go up and, into Moosonee and Moose Factory and have a really great experience, and it brings you all the way back. You can stop along the way, spend a night in North Bay, spend a night in Timmins, and you could have a really fun week. I'm going to use the Northlander train. It was in Ontario for 113 years and got taken away by the previous government, who called the North, sadly, called the North a wasteland. And that's in the legislature. I was there when it was said, and I felt just sickened by it, and decided to spend the next 14 years bringing that train back. And the very first thing Premier Ford said is, "What do you need up north, buddy?" And I said, "We need the Northlander train to be returned." And he said, "Consider it done." And that was 8 years ago, and now it's going to be home, and that's just a great feeling. It's the talk of the town, it's the talk of the north, but also it's going to get people up north and people down south. Critical minerals are really, the key word in it is critical. You're not going to be able to do things in the world without critical minerals. China produces almost all the critical minerals in the world. The funny thing is, in Ontario, we have every single critical mineral required to build a lithium-ion battery and all of the new derivatives of these batteries. It's all there. It's in our backyard. So Ontario's north is going to produce all of the raw materials, process them in the north, no longer shipping them overseas to be processed, which has been happening for generations. Imagine shipping all these rocks to Norway. All of our platinum and palladium goes to Norway to be processed, if you could still imagine that. All of these things will be processed so that Southern Ontario, where goods are made, will be able to be made with Ontario-made products. I just want to talk for 1 second, because the Premier talked about Buy Ontario. Here's what this means. Here's what it means to the auto sector. Every Ontario government office, all the broader public service, including hospitals, fire halls, police stations, city halls, are going to be required to buy Ontario, buy Canadian. What does that mean granularly? That means if you're a city hall and you're ready to buy a new vehicle for your police department or your fire service or your own city hall, this is the regulations that are coming through. You are going to have a menu. Here's what you can buy. You can buy, you want a pickup truck? You can buy a Silverado made at General Motors in Oshawa, or you can buy a Ford 250 and up when they're starting to be built this fall in Oakville. That's it. You don't get to buy another pickup truck. You want a car? You buy a Honda CR-V, you buy a Honda, all of the other makes that are made in Alliston. That's it. You can buy a Toyota RAV4, you can buy a Lexus NX. That's it. You can't buy another vehicle. You want an electric vehicle, you can buy a Dodge Charger that's built in Windsor. It's a pursuit vehicle. We're making pursuit kits to add to that. The Dodge Charger is the police vehicle. That's where you get it. That's it. You don't get to buy and a Pacifica van. That's it. That's your menu. That's Buy Ontario. You cannot buy anything that's not made in Ontario. That's what Buy Ontario, it's the law. So that's how hard we're pushing on Ontario, on our steel, our aluminum, our lumber, our copper. Everything's got to be bought here. The cans in Massili, the Premier said, found out we don't make tin cans. We take all the tin that's made in Ontario, it all gets shipped to California. All that dead weight gets shipped to California. The tin cans are made there, and they're all shipped back. Imagine shipping all that air back to Ontario. That's going to be over shortly. We have 1 or 2 different tin can companies that'll make here. You'll never have a drop of tin leave Ontario again. That's the kind of thing that is actually happening in Ontario.
Great. To wrap it up, fun question. Tell the room. Minister Fedeli is very well traveled, but even before he was the minister, how many countries have you visited in?
Oh, long before I got into politics, 100 countries before politics.
And so now, what are you up to?
I don't count. I pretty much have never been to anywhere new.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. But as I'm looking at one of our staffers over here and another one of our staffers over here, they know you get off the plane, you dust yourself off, you have a shower, you put a suit on or a dress on in Sarah's case, and we're in meetings. Like they don't really care to ever go on a second trip with me.
What's your
None of them do.
What's your secret weapon for jet lag?
Oh, you just watch the clock on the plane. Know when to sleep and know when to make sure you don't sleep. But I do have a request for everybody here.
Yes.
I really do have
Please.
a very big request. You're all serious business people, and we have a very serious problem in front of us right now that you can help us with. The Defence Infrastructure Bank. It has been awarded to Canada. That's a big, big win for the country, but we need it here in Toronto. We need every single one of you. Yeah, big win. Every single one of you needs to call somebody today, tomorrow, this week, but today if you can. Call somebody that you know, either in the federal government or who has influence. We have to have this thing land in Toronto. It's really going to be down to Toronto, Montreal, maybe a bit of Ottawa, but it's got to land here in Toronto, where the 107 consular offices are, where we have flights in and out to all of these places that are going to need it, where we have all of the banks are here. This is the financial capital of Canada. It's now a political decision. That's all there is to it. The actual technical decision to come to Canada is done and dusted. Now it's a political-only decision. So call your political friends everywhere and make sure that you do that this week. We want the Defence Bank here in downtown Toronto. That's my request.
Thank you.
Saves me about 200 phone calls.
Oh, that's great.
Wonderful. Minister Fedeli, thank you for your insightful and engaging discussion on Ontario's economy. Laryssa, thank you for guiding today's conversation. To Premier Ford, although he had to depart, we extend our sincere thanks for joining us and for sharing his government's priorities at this important moment. On behalf of Canadian Club Toronto, thank you again to our presenting sponsor, Bruce Power, and our event sponsors, Agnico Eagle, Bell Canada, Enbridge, TC Energy, and TELUS. Thank you as well to our season sponsors, Canadian Bankers Association and Carpenters Regional Council, and to our official airline sponsor, Air Canada. I would also like to thank our production partner, VVC Live, for their continued excellence, and our sincere thanks to our friends here at Fairmont Royal York for hosting us this morning, and of course to the dedicated team at Canadian Club Toronto, whose work makes these gatherings possible. Before we close, I invite you to join us for some upcoming Canadian Club Toronto events. On May 11th, we host a conversation with Elizabeth Wademan, CEO of Canada's Development Agency, and Mark Mackey, CEO of Trans Mountain Corporation, about the success and value to Canada of the Trans Mountain Pipeline extension. On May 25th, we welcome the Honourable Greg Rickford to discuss Ontario's plans for the Ring of Fire. And on June 1st, we host a conversation on Canada's food moment with leaders from Farm Credit Canada and Naya Ventures. Please visit canadianclub.org for more information and to join us. Members and guests, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We look forward to welcoming you again soon. Have a wonderful day.